Part 4. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 31. When Su Ming and Master Peng rushed to Xiong Mountain, tourists near Xiong Mountain had been evacuated. Xiao Li, the keeper of Xiong Mountain, was already sweating profusely. He pointed at several trees in Xiong Mountain through the cage and stammered. Said, "Well, it's right there. The area of Xiong Mountain is only a little more than 1/3 of the entire Monkey Mountain. There are also some rock areas in it, but there is a small forest with more than a dozen trees in the forest. Several honeycombs almost as big as basketballs hang on the tree tops. From a distance, they look like heavy fruits. Many bees are flying in and out of the honeycombs. Under the tree where the honeycomb is located, 2 larger bears sit on the ground with their legs crossed, their eyes wide open and round, staring intently at the honeycomb a few meters above their heads. A small black bear, almost 1 meter tall, is the man stood up, resting his 2 front paws on the tree trunk, pointing at the honeycomb above his head, making a wee-wee cry, with a greedy look on his face, and glistening saliva dripping down the corners of his mouth. After seeing those honeycombs clearly, Master Peng was very surprised and asked Xiao Li, "Such a big honeycomb? Xiao Li, do you know whether it is a bee or a wasp?" Wasps are also commonly referred to as wasps. They are much more poisonous and aggressive than bees. If you are stung by a wasp, you will easily become poisoned if you don't deal with it in time. A dozen wasps can sting a person alive. Bees generally do not sting easily. Their tail sting is connected to the intestines, and the bee will die after stinging. Unlike wasps, their tail stinger can be reused. If it were a hornet's nest the size of several basketballs, it would be a huge problem. The zoo would probably not dare to deal with it, and would have to hire a professional fire brigade to deal with it. It's not a wasp, it's a bee. Xiao Li, the keeper of Xiangshan Mountain, said with a sad face, "I only discovered it the day before yesterday. At that time, there was only 1 bee nest, which was about the size of a fist. It's not like there were no bees in the zoo, so I didn't pay attention at the time. But when I saw it yesterday, it was amazing. Suddenly, there were several more bees in the nest, and I felt something was wrong. I prepared the tools in the evening and thought of getting rid of them today, but I didn't expect that when I came in the afternoon, there were more bees and they became so big. As the caretaker of Xiong Mountain, if a bear is stung by a bee, or if a bee stings someone, Xiao Li will be blamed. At least 1 month's performance bonus will be deducted. If something big happens, he may not even be able to work. None are guaranteed. Like Su Ming, Xiao Li is also a temporary worker. His family also comes from a rural area and he has a younger sister who is in school. He relies entirely on his income to support the family. No wonder he is in such a hurry." Master Peng and several other keepers looked at each other in confusion. The plants in the zoo are lush and there are many flowers and plants. It is normal for some bees to appear occasionally and even small bee nests. But so many of them came out overnight, which is a bit strange. It's not normal anymore. Xiong Mountain is not far from the back mountain. There are lush flowers in the back mountain, and it is a wild environment with few human traces. Even if the bees have a home, they should make their home in the back mountain. Why come to Xiong Mountain when everything is fine? "Xiao Su, what do you think?" Master Peng asked Su Ming subconsciously. Su Ming couldn't figure out why for the time being. Are these bees coming for him? But it doesn't matter even if you think about it. Although animal friends can be friendly to animals, it needs to be actively used by oneself. It is not like honey, and the scent can be smelled from a long distance. Ignore the reason for now. Xiao Li, you two should lure those bears away first. Xiao Su, follow me down and poke the nest. Master Peng put on a hood and held a long bamboo pole in one hand. One end of the long bamboo pole was wrapped in cotton cloth poured with gasoline. He then pointed at a large bucket and motioned for Su Ming to carry the bucket. Su Ming felt depressed and thought, "Master, you are too kind." It was obviously Xiao Li who was negligent in his work, which caused the bee nest to multiply and become a disaster, but Master Peng took on the most dangerous part of poking the hornet's nest. He also took a piece with him. There was no other way. Who told me that I was Master Peng's apprentice? When he got in, I had no choice but to bite the bullet and follow him with a bucket. Friends of animals should be effective in dealing with bees, right? I just don't know how many bees I can control at one time. Su Ming looked at those large hives and was not very sure. There might be thousands of bees in such a big hive. If one of them failed, they would all come out to attack him. Thinking of this scene, Su Ming's scalp felt numb and goosebumps appeared all over his body. He subconsciously covered his head and face tightly, leaving only his two eyes exposed. He had swimming goggles hanging around his neck, ready to wear them at any time. Protect eyes. There is a keeper entrance at the bottom of Bear Mountain. After opening the iron door and walking along the dark passage for 7 or 8 meters, you come to a dark room. This place is divided into two parts, one side is where the black bears rest, and the other side is where the keepers put food. There is a device to control the iron gate on the wall. When it is time to clean Bear Mountain, use food to lure the black bear back to the resting place, and then the administrator on the other side uses the switch to close the door of the black bear resting room, and then you can enter Bear Mountain. Now the 3 members of the black bear family are staying under the tree. The lounge is empty, and some uneaten fruits and meats are thrown around randomly, emitting an unpleasant smell. Ding ding ding, ding ding ding. Keeper Xiao Li held a large piece of raw pork in one hand and used a small iron rod to hit the iron cage with the other to make a sound, attracting a family of black bears not far away. Normally, as soon as the black bear family hears this sound, they know there is food and will come running over immediately. But at this time, the 3 bears just looked here absent-mindedly, then turned back and stared at the beehive on the tree with great concentration, drooling, without even moving their butts. The little black bear didn't even look at this side, and his long drool hung out of his mouth in a shiny straight line, almost flowing to the ground. Obviously, honey is much more attractive to them than fat, greasy, and not very fresh pork. Xiao Li was so anxious that sweat came out, and he took a small iron rod and hit it hard, and the noise was so loud that it hurt people's ears. However, the black bear family not only did not come over, but a larger black bear also grinned and roared at this side. The black bear's hoo-hoo is not snoring, but a manifestation of anger. Obviously, the big black bear is very dissatisfied with these guys who disturbed their YY honey deliciousness. Xiao Su, do you have any ideas? Master Peng suddenly asked Su Ming. Su Ming followed him to feed the animals every day. Master Peng clearly felt that the animals were very close to him. In addition to the glorious deeds of saving the little girl before, Master Peng had an inexplicable trust in Su Ming. Not far away, because the little black bear kept shaking the tree, the beehive on the tree finally shook slightly. A drop of honey dripped out of the beehive and fell into the little black bear's grown mouth. Woo woo woo. The little black bear let out a happy cry, and Su Ming's mental power also sent a burst of joyful emotions. Damn it, it's going to be bad. Su Ming did not feel happy, but roared, quickly shrank his neck, put on swimming goggles, and covered himself in a military coat, covering himself tightly. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 32. One of the typical characteristics of foodies is that they can give up their lives, but they cannot give up food. The black bear family is obviously the overlord among foodies. After the little bear ate the honey, the whole person, oh no, the whole bear seemed to have hysteria, making a humming sound, twisting its fat butt, and shaking the tree trunk desperately. The tree trunk was not very thick to begin with, and it trembled immediately after being shaken so hard. It would be fine if the bear child was crazy, after all, he was still young and weak, but after the bear father and mother joined in, the situation was immediately different. The three black bears seemed to have discussed it beforehand, surrounded the tree trunk in a circle and shook it violently. The tree trunk immediately squeaked under the heavy load, and the leaves and dead branches flew everywhere. The black bear father took 2 steps back, and actually posed a charging posture, and slammed his shoulder into the tree. The tree trunk shook violently, and the honeycombs hanging on it all fell off. Buzz. A buzzing sound could be heard from a long distance away. Before the beehive landed, a black cloud floated out of it. A large group of bees flew out of the beehive and circled around the fallen beehive. The foodies below looked up stupidly, stretched out their chubby bare paws, and caught the falling beehive. Although they were sitting there fat, like a meat mountain, their movements were quite agile and precise. 3 bears, 2 big ones each took one beehive, and the little black bear held it with both arms. All 5 beehives were caught steadily. The black bear family was so happy to get the food, they opened their mouths wide to bite the beehive in their arms, and the black bees in the air exploded on the spot, swooping down towards the black bear family in groups. Ayo 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 ayo. Ayo ayo ayo. Ayo ayo ayo. A burst of howling bears suddenly sounded in the bear mountain. The black bears finally knocked down the beehive, but before they could eat a mouthful of honey, they were surrounded by countless bees and stung randomly. The black bears used their big palms to slap the surrounding bees at first, but there were too many bees and they couldn't beat them at all. Instead, they caused a lot of accidental injuries. The big black bear slapped the bees to save his son, but unexpectedly, the little black bear was slapped over and rolled away like a meatball. The 3 black bears quickly gave up their futile resistance and ran around in the bear mountain. Only black bears with thick skin and flesh could withstand it. If it were another animal, I'm afraid it would be half dead after this round of stinging. Xiao Li was very anxious. If something really happened to these 3 black bears, he would definitely lose his job. He desperately knocked on the iron railings, trying to get the black bear to hide in the lounge, but the black bear family was already a little crazy at this time and didn't notice this place at all. Jump into the lake, Su Ming quickly communicated with the black bear with his mental power. There was a very shallow lake in the bear mountain for the black bear to play in. Although the bear child was the youngest, he was the smartest one. He immediately understood what Su Ming meant and jumped into the lake without hesitation, splashing water everywhere. The water immediately covered the little black bear, chasing its honey and circling for a few times. Seeing that there was no place to bite, it could only turn its gun head to besiege the bear father and mother. Seeing that the situation was not good, the bear father and mother roared a few times and killed a bloody road in the bee swarm. Of course, it was their own blood. A fish jump followed and jumped into the lake. This was bad luck. The lake was neither big nor deep. To put it bluntly, it was just a small pool. The little bear was small and most of its body could still hide in the water, but the bear father and mother were too big. The water in the pool only reached their stomachs at most, which could not stop the attack of the bees. Originally, the little black bear could still hide in the pool, but the bear father and mother jumped and squeezed out half of the pool water. The water level in the pool dropped a lot, and even the little black bear could not hide. Su Ming snatched the iron stick from Xiao Li and knocked it hard on the cage. He shouted in his mental power, "Come back here." Xiao Li knocked and knocked for a long time, but the black bear seemed to be deaf and ignored him. Su Ming knocked once, and the black bear family immediately climbed out of the pool very obediently, without even shaking off the water drops on their fur, and rushed into the cage in the lounge with their wet heads. "Yeah? How did you do it?" Before Xiao Li could even be surprised, he immediately screamed, "Oh my God!" A large group of bees followed closely behind him. Whether it was the keeper side or the black bear lounge, there were only iron cages surrounding them, which could not stop the bees at all. The black bear ran over and brought the bees with it. This is good. Not only the bears are in trouble, but people will also be unlucky. Su Ming had no time to explain, so he quickly took out a lighter to light the fire. Master Peng on the side immediately understood what Su Ming meant and hurriedly handed over the bamboo pole soaked in gasoline in his hand. With a bang, the flames jumped up, and the bamboo pole turned into a small torch. Master Peng stretched out the small torch and waved it at the bee swarm, shouting, "Light it up quickly, light it up quickly, bees are afraid of fire and smoke." The remaining keepers woke up from their dreams and fumbled with lighters to light the small torches. After lighting several torches, they finally managed to keep the swarm of bees outside the iron cage. Even so, a few fast-flying bees still got into the cage, and Xiao Li got several big lumps on his hands. Most animals are afraid of fire, and black bears are no exception. The bear couple was locked in a cage in the lounge, with the torches close to them. This pair of heartless foodies didn't know whether they were frightened by the fire or stung by the bees. They screamed and huddled in the corner of the cage, looking out with fear in their big black eyes. The bees gathered outside the cage, blocked by the torches. They didn't dare to drill into the cage for a while, but there was no sign of dispersing. The torches were about to burn out. "What's going on?" Master Peng said strangely. "It stands to reason that the bees will rush to sting people when they are disturbed. This is an instinctive reaction, and they will not have any emotions such as grudges, especially when they encounter fire and water. The bees will generally disperse." The bees in front of him seemed to have an irreconcilable hatred with the black bears. They would rather be suffocated to death by the thick smoke than retreat. Su Ming subconsciously turned his head and looked at the black bear family in the cage next door, and suddenly realized it. The three foodies were still holding honeycombs in their arms, and they were reluctant to throw away the food when they ran away. A honeycomb had been bitten in half, revealing a big-bellied queen bee. No wonder these bees refused to leave. The queen bee was held hostage by the black bear. They were not venting their anger at all, but to rescue the queen bee. Su Ming was so angry with these two guys, how greedy they were. "Throw the honeycomb out," Su Ming glared fiercely, and all his mental power rushed out and rushed towards the black bear couple. Woo woo. Su Ming had been drinking monkey wine during this period, and his mental power was growing rapidly. At this time, his full effort should not be underestimated. The two black bears were so fierce by their mental power that they were a little scared and obediently threw the honeycomb in their hands out. But the problem was that these two guys seemed to be too obedient. They didn't throw the honeycomb out of the cage, but threw it towards Su Ming and his friends through the cage. Su Ming's eyes widened, and 1,000 alpacas ran through his mind. "Oh my God! I said throw it out, not throw it to me," Su Ming roared in his heart. The bear's strength is not exaggerated. The beehive was not strong to begin with. After they threw it hard, the beehive hit the iron railing and broke into several pieces, which fell all over the ground. Due to inertia, the poor queen bee rushed out of the beehive, drew a beautiful parabola, and hit the wall on Su Ming's side, and fell into a pulp. The surroundings suddenly became quiet, and everyone was dumbfounded, staring at the queen bee on the wall, which had turned into a pool of blood and flesh. "Pa!" The flames rang lightly, and the last torch finally went out. "Run!" I don't know who roared first, and the voice was almost crying. Several people rolled and crawled, holding their heads and running away from Bear Mountain. A swarm of angry bees rushed through the cage and chased after it. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 33. The bees were really not smart enough. It was obviously the black bear that killed their queen bee, but they chased after the humans and rushed in. They chased Su Ming and his friends. How could a human run faster than a flying bee? Several people were immediately surrounded by a large group of bees. Although they were wearing thick protective clothing, there were too many bees and they were small. They kept drilling through the gaps in the protective clothing. Before several people ran out of the bare mountain, Xiao Li and Master Peng screamed and were stung several times. The cage passage was short and narrow, with rockery on both sides. Xiao Li fled in a hurry. He was not careful and hit his head on a stone. He screamed and fell to the ground. "What are you screaming for? Run!" Su Ming turned around and supported Xiao Li with one hand, waving his other hand to drive away the bees. Thank you, thank you." Xiao Li climbed up and ran after him stumblingly. He was stung several times and his voice was a little out of tune. After finally running out of the bare mountain, the bees were still following closely behind him. Master Peng shouted, "Run separately, run to where there are fewer people." Several people immediately parted ways and ran in different directions. The bee colony also split into several groups behind them and chased them separately. The bee colony chasing Su Ming was the largest in number, accounting for more than half of all the bees. "Xiao Su, be careful," Master Peng found something wrong and yelled at Su Ming, holding up the extinguished bamboo pole and turning around to save Su Ming. "I'm young and run fast, it's okay." Su Ming ran forward without looking back, and while running, he raised the half honeycomb in his hand and shook it. In the blink of an eye, a large group of bees seemed to be attracted by the honeycomb in Su Ming's hand, and all turned their guns to chase Su Ming. Su Ming ran forward desperately, and soon he disappeared, and Master Peng and several other breeders were finally out of danger. Xiao Li waved to drive away the last few bees around him, took off his headgear, and his eyes were red and swollen. I don't know if he was moved or stung, anyway, tears were pouring. Master Su is such a good person. Su Ming didn't have any idea of sacrificing himself for others. His mental power was very useful for these brainless little guys, just like casting a net, he could control a large group at once. Anyway, under the control of mental power, the bees couldn't sting him, so he just did a favor and helped the other people. "Get out of the way, bees are coming, I don't care if they sting me." Su Ming was surrounded by bees, just like being shrouded in a black fog, very weird. He waved and shouted while running. Tourists on the roadside saw the scene and hid to the sides as if they were avoiding the plague. They took out their mobile phones to take pictures of this rare scene. "Hey, isn't that the guy who raised the lucky cat?" Someone recognized Su Ming. It seems that Su Ming has become very famous after appearing on TV. He can still be recognized even though he is dressed like a biochemical warrior. Is the zoo adding a new show? Bee stinging performance, someone on the side said curiously. "You are looking for death, you are having a mad time," the man said in disbelief. Su Ming didn't care about these. He ran to a less crowded place with the bees, thinking secretly that he couldn't go back to the waterside pavilion now. Although the bees would not sting him, he couldn't stay in the waterside pavilion all day to control the bees. It would be bad if they stung tourists or cats and dogs. For the same reason, he couldn't go to other places in the zoo. Bees are not pests. Since they are controlled, there is no need to kill them. Su Ming simply ran towards the back mountain, brought these bees back to the back mountain, let them settle down there, maybe they could even make some honey for him to drink. Soon they arrived at the zoo wall where the Monkey King escaped last time. The wall was more than 3 meters high, and Su Ming didn't see much effort. He sprinted, grabbed the branches on the side and climbed to the top of the wall very quickly, jumped up, and disappeared on the other side of the wall. There were few people in the back mountain, so Su Ming didn't have to pretend to be running for his life. He simply slowed down his pace and walked leisurely towards the deep mountains, letting the group of bees fly around him. The bees followed Su Ming at first, but after more than half an hour, the bee swarm suddenly accelerated collectively and flew to the front, drilling into the deep mountains and old forests as if they were leading Su Ming. Through the mental connection, Su Ming could feel that the bees were very familiar with this place, and even had a sense of attachment. "Is the front your original home?" Su Ming became a little curious. The bees were too low in intelligence to accurately convey any information to Su Ming. They just kept flying in a certain direction. Su Ming found a branch as thick as a sugar cane, kicked it off with one foot, and held it in his hand as a weapon. Then he kept a short distance from the bees and followed them slowly. After walking for almost an hour, the group of bees finally stopped and gathered outside a small forest, buzzing and flying, but they did not dare to fly into the forest. At the same time, they were also afraid, as if there was something in the forest that frightened them. "Oh my God, weren't you very brave when you stung me? You are not afraid of people, so what else are you afraid of?" Su Ming said this, but he was alert in his heart. Nature is magical. Many animals have their own natural enemies. The strongest elephant can be killed by a weak mouse. The fact that bees are not afraid of people does not mean that they are not afraid of other animals. Holding the branch tightly, he lay on a stone and looked down at the forest from a high position. The back hill was full of trees and stones. The forest in front of us was nothing special, except that the grass and trees were more lush. In addition to the trees, the ground was covered with half-foot-high weeds and wildflowers. At a glance, no dangerous creatures were found. Grant you the position of little drill winds. Su Ming controlled a few bees and wanted them to fly into the forest to investigate. However, the bees, who had always been very obedient, showed signs of resistance at this time and were obviously unwilling to enter the forest. Su Ming's current mental power was not something that a few little bees could break free of. Although they were reluctant, they still flew into the forest obediently under Su Ming's power and scattered in all directions. In less than a minute, a mental power suddenly broke. Two flying creatures that looked like bees, but were obviously larger in size and covered in gray and brown, appeared in the woods and stung a little drill wind with the sting on their tails. The little Zhuanfeng lost its ability to resist immediately. The two guys immediately opened their mouths wide, split their front jaws like sickles, bit the little Zhuanfeng in half, and then gnawed it with relish. It turned out to be a wasp. No wonder the bees were driven away. Seeing this scene, Su Ming suddenly realized. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 34. Not long after a few bees acting as small wind drills flew into the forest, two wasps appeared in the forest, bit a bee in half, and lay on the bee's body and gnawed it with relish. Wasps, scientifically known as hornets, are larger than bees and are very aggressive and toxic. A slight sting can cause anaphylactic shock and even life-threatening. The wasp in front of me was gray-black all over, with a dark black chest. It looked evil. It should be a guy called black-chested wasp. The wasp that beekeepers are most afraid of encountering is this kind of wasp. Black-chested wasps cannot make honey themselves, but they like to eat honey and bees. Therefore, they can be said to be the natural enemy of bees. Although they are rare in number, with only dozens or even dozens of them in a group, bees are no match for black-chested wasps because of their large size and fierce temperament. A small group of black-chested wasps can make a bee farm completely barren. Over time, they can even eat all the bees. From the perspective of playing games, bees are a group of farmers who dig, and black-chested wasps are elite combat troops. Moreover, black-chested wasps are very vengeful. If they cannot be completely surrounded and eliminated, the escaped wasps will often come back for revenge. Therefore, once beekeepers find that there are swarms of black-chested wasps around the apiary, they generally choose to abandon the original beekeeping land. If they really cannot give up, they often raise a small group of bees not far from the wasp colony and use them to offer to the black-chested wasps. Su Ming suddenly realized that it was no wonder that this group of bees moved and fled to the zoo in a panic. It turned out that a group of robbers broke into their hometown. As soon as the black-chested wasps appeared, the bees wandering outside the forest immediately became a little agitated, buzzing and flying around, just wanting to escape. What are you afraid of? There are only two of them, and you have more than 1,000. Before Su Ming finished speaking, there was a buzz in the forest, and a large group of black-chested wasps emerged, black and dense like a dark cloud, probably hundreds of them. The individual combat power of black-breasted wasps far exceeds that of honeybees, and they are also the natural enemies of honeybees. Honeybees are inherently afraid of the former. Hundreds of black-breasted wasps gather together. Not to mention more than 1,000 bees, even tens of thousands of bees may not dare to fight with them. The black-breasted wasps found a large group of delicious food and immediately rushed towards the swarm. The bees were already panicking and at a loss. Their flying speed was far less than that of the black-breasted wasps, and they were immediately dispersed. The wasps rushed into the bees and killed them all. After a small group of black-breasted wasps dangling in the air for a while, they actually flew to where Su Ming was hiding. "Dare to rush at me? Are you looking for death?" Su Ming's mental power surged out and covered the black-breasted wasps with his head. At the moment of contact with the mental power, this small group of black-breasted wasps suddenly stopped in the air, like a traveler who had lost his direction, flapping their wings in a daze. The wasp is a fierce character with the name of Killer Bee. Although it is not big and not smart, its temperament is extremely cruel. Su Ming only controlled a dozen wasps and felt that his mental power was not enough. Su Ming secretly estimated that with his current mental power level, he could control less than 30 wasps at most. Not far away, there were hundreds of black-chested wasps wreaking havoc and slaughtering bees. Every second, a large number of bee corpses fell like raindrops. This is not good. Su Ming is still counting on these bees to make honey in the future. Moreover, these bees have been in contact with mental power, and can be indirectly regarded as Su Ming's subordinates. As the boss, Su Ming certainly can't watch his younger brothers being slaughtered. "Go, fight them." Su Ming's mental power shook, and he controlled these dozen wasps as the vanguard, turned the gun head, and rushed into the wasp group. Then he used the remaining mental power to control the remaining bee troops, followed by more than a dozen hornets, and launched a counter-attack against the hornet army. This caught the hornet swarm off guard. The main force of the black-breasted hornets had no idea that the comrades who fought side by side with them the previous second would betray and become puppet army lackeys the next second. They were caught off guard and were killed in a small area. The reason why bees cannot beat hornets is not only their small size and weak toxicity, but also their relatively mild temperament, making it difficult for them to form a large-scale attack. Just like a group of sheep encountering wolves, although they have an advantage in numbers, they can only be slaughtered and escape. But now the situation is different. Under Su Ming's control, the bees are divided into teams, each led by a fierce puppet army hornet, which is equivalent to organizing a group of stragglers to form an army. A bee just stabbed its stinger into the abdomen of a black-breasted hornet, and the black-breasted hornet turned its head and bit off the bee's slender waist. But then, more bees rushed towards it, at the cost of their own lives, and desperately stabbed their stingers into its body. In the blink of an eye, the wasp was surrounded and beaten by a group of small bees, and its body was full of stingers. A puppet army wasp captain flew past it, and with a snap of his jaws, he bit off its head. If the small bees are just ordinary soldiers like cannon fodder, then these rebellious puppet army black-breasted wasps are the leading generals, the vanguards of the charge, and the fierce generals who can decide the outcome on the battlefield. Wherever there are tough guys, the puppet army wasps will pounce there, and wherever there is a dangerous situation in the battle, there will be the figure of the black-breasted wasp. Under Su Ming's command, the originally one-sided battle situation quickly reversed. The bees gradually changed from the slaughtered side to the encircling and suppressing side, and black-breasted wasps were killed one after another. Of course, black-breasted wasps cannot just sit back and die. In terms of temperament, they are even more ferocious than beasts like crocodiles and tigers. Although they are at a disadvantage, they have no intention of escaping at all. On the contrary, they are even more ferocious. The bee swarm strikes back. Among them, a few big strong generals caused a huge attrition to the bee army. They kept killing the bees that rushed up, and they looked like an enemy of 10,000 people. Seeing this scene, Su Ming rolled his eyes and controlled a few puppet army wasps to sneak over. Although wasps are fierce, their intelligence is not very high. They cannot tell which wasps are comrades and which are traitors. They often see wasps flying around and think they are fellow wasps coming to help in the battle. As a result, the puppet army wasps secretly acted as assassins, taking advantage of the fact that Hu Feng was not paying attention during the battle, secretly carried out evil tricks, and accurately killed each of the wasps. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 35. Under the control of Generalissimo Su Ming, it didn't take long for the battle to come to an end. With the cooperation of the puppet army, the Bee Legion won a great victory. The corpses of bees and Hu Feng were everywhere on the ground. Of the hundreds of black-breasted wasps, there are only 20 or 30 scattered ones left, the vast majority of which are puppet army wasps. The few remaining ones are unable to form any effective counterattack at all, and are taken away by the puppet army. Surrounded by everyone, there is nowhere to run. Nearly 1,000 bees also suffered heavy losses, but after all, the population base was huge. After a battle, there were still 500 or 600 surviving bees. Commander Su Ming sat on the ground a little tired. No matter how weak the bees and wasps were, they were still alive. Controlling so many of them in battle at the same time was a huge drain on Su Ming. It's not without its benefits. Mental power is like a skill. The more you use it, the more proficient you become, and it will gradually increase. By commanding this battle, Su Ming's level of using mental power has obviously reached a new level. The number of steps, as well as the accuracy and distance, have all been improved compared to before. Therefore, the remaining wasps were undoubtedly controlled by Su Ming and joined the ranks of the puppet army. Only the bees and the puppet troops were left. The enemy no longer existed, and the battle naturally ended. The remaining wasps and bees flew in front of Su Ming like troops under review. After the bloody battle side by side, there seemed to be a bit of comradeship between the puppet army black-breasted wasps and bees. Although it was not close to each other, the camp was clearly divided into two parts, but there was no continuing relationship between them. Attack the opponent. Go and see if there are any remaining enemy troops in the forest, Su Ming gave the order, and the wasp flew into the forest with a swarm of bees, spreading out and searching everywhere. Animals are not as cunning as humans. When fighting, they either swarm up side by side or disperse in a rush. It is impossible for them to behave like watching their teammates from the other side of the fire pit. The swarm searched the woods for a while, but did not find any remaining enemies. Su Ming waved his hand. It's decided, bees will live in this forest from now on. Here in the wilderness, it is not easy to be disturbed by humans. At the same time, the surrounding flowers and plants are prosperous, which is a good place for bees to make their homes. Those bees used to live here. Now that they have regained their lost land and returned to their homes, they were immediately excited and flew around Su Ming. This is what it means to attract bees and butterflies. Although there are no stray butterflies, there are hundreds of wild bees. I'm not little dragon girl, don't hang around me all day, go settle down, Su Ming snapped his fingers at the bees. The bees flew away, but the remaining 20 or 30 puppet soldiers had nowhere to go. They flew around Su Ming pitifully, with a look of for the sake of the party and the country, I'll help my brother and no credit. It also means hard work. I have to find a way out for you. Su Ming thought for a while, well, you live here too, and the bees give you part of the honey to eat. Anyway, they can't eat all the honey themselves. You are responsible for protecting the bees, but you are not allowed to kill the bees anymore. Buzz buzz, buzz buzz, the wasps also rushed into the forest happily. Now the wasps were at an absolute disadvantage in terms of numbers. After a bloody battle controlled by their mental power, the bees also had the ability to fight Hu Feng. With his experience, he is stronger than ordinary bees. If these Hu Feng make trouble while he is away, the bee swarm will also be able to suppress them. The black-breasted wasps also flew away happily. They could live a stable life and no one wanted to fight and kill them. In the past, although bees were weak, they would not take the initiative to feed them honey even if they were beaten to death. They would rather move and fight to death than compromise. The wasps could only remove their heads from their waistbands and rob, which was troublesome but also entailed certain risks. Now that Su Ming has issued an order, it can be expected that these wasps will soon be able to live a good life with their shirts on their backs and their food on their hands. A black-breasted wasp, which was slightly larger than the other wasps, landed at the end. Just as it was about to fly into the forest, it suddenly trembled and stopped in mid-air. "Guzi, come with me and be my liaison from now on," Su Ming snapped his fingers. The wasp turned its head, flew towards Su Ming again, landed on his shoulder, and followed Su Ming down the mountain. This rather large wasp was one of the first puppet soldiers to join Su Ming. It was the most vigorous in killing its own kind during the battle, so it also had the honor of being named by Su Ming. As soon as Su Ming and Guzi returned to Ting Feng Shui Pavilion, they found that a large group of people had already arrived at the water pavilion, including Director Song, Sister Tong, Master Peng, Xiao Li, the breeder at Xiangshan, and Section Chief Dong from the security department of the zoo. All in the room. "Hey, why are the leaders here?" Su Ming was stunned, and secretly let Guzi fly to the eaves of the waterside pavilion and hide him. He could move around freely, but he couldn't hurt anyone. Seeing Su Ming appear, everyone in the room breathed a sigh of relief and looked relieved. Sister Tong was quick to speak and was the first to say, "Oh, I heard that in order to protect other comrades, you used a honeycomb to lure away the bees. The director immediately sent someone to pick you up, but he didn't see you for a long time, and everyone was extremely anxious, fearing that something would happen to you." Master Peng punched Su Ming hard on the shoulder. "What a good boy, I didn't even answer my phone calls." It scared the master as he spoke. He walked around in a circle and looked up and down. Su Ming said, "You're not injured, are you?" "No, I lured the bees to the back hill, then threw the honeycomb away and ran back in a circle." Su Ming shook his head and said, "It's good that you're not injured. I told you that Xiao Su is a good kid. What can a group of bees do to him?" Director Song stood up with a smile and nodded to Su Ming. Then he looked at Section Chief Dong and Xiao Li with a slightly serious face. "Old Dong, if there are bees in the zoo, you, the security section chief, will be responsible if someone is stung. And Xiao Li, if Xiao Su hadn't ignored his own safety and led the bees away, you would have been derelict in your duty. You two should thank Xiao Su the most." "Master Su, thank you so much. Alas, it's all my fault for being careless at work." Xiao Li stood up and bowed deeply to Su Ming. He had a circle of gauze wrapped around his head, and blood stains were seeping out of the gauze. It seemed that he had fallen heavily when he ran away. He thanked Su Ming from the bottom of his heart. He didn't say anything else. When he escaped from Xiangshan, he hit his head on a rock and fell down. At that time, he was dizzy and couldn't even tell the direction. If Su Ming hadn't turned around and pulled him back, he might have been stung by the bees. Although bees are not as poisonous as wasps, being stung by hundreds of bees is no joke. 3 lives are not enough. He bowed very deeply. Su Ming laughed and quickly supported him. "Master Li, you are too polite. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 36. He deserves to thank you. You have contributed to the zoo, Director Song said with a smile. Section Chief Dong was also following Director Song. He heard something in Director Song's words and said at the same time, what the director said is that Comrade Xiao Su not only dealt with the beehive in time this time, but also avoided a bigger incident in the process of handling the accident. He was brave and decisive, sacrificed himself for others, and protected other colleagues. Comrade Xiao Su should not only be thanked, but also commended. Su Ming was stunned. What does this mean? Section Chief Dong is the leader. When he said praise, to a certain extent, he represented the meaning of the zoo's leadership. He looked at Director Song inexplicably, but Director Song had a calm look on his face. There was no clue. He stood up, nodded slightly to Su Ming, and said with a smile, "Okay, okay, okay. Since you're fine, we're relieved. You can rest first while we go back." After that, he led a group of people and left the waterside pavilion. Master Pen walked at the end and whispered a few words to Su Ming, "You kid, don't be so impulsive when doing things in the future. You must pay attention to safety." "Don't worry, I'm fine." Su Ming tugged on Master Pen's sleeve, bit his ear and asked in a low voice, "Just now, Section Chief Dong, what did you mean by praise?" "Praise is praise. The leader values you. Do your best," Master Peng said with a smile. Su Ming could only express his bewilderment in a vulgar way like a shrug. "The leader has not valued me for a day or two, so there is no need to be so mysterious." After seeing off Director Song and the others, Su Ming closed the door of the waterside pavilion, called Gozi out, and used his mental power to call several cats and snapping turtles in one by one. Dehe opened his eyes wide and stared at Gozi curiously. He seemed to regard Gozi as an interesting toy, and even flapped his paws twice, trying to catch Gozi. Gozi buzzed and ran away. He didn't want to play with this big guy. If he wasn't careful, he would be shattered into pieces and turned into flesh. Dehe refused to give up, and jumped up to a height of more than half a meter with great agility, as if he must catch you. Of course Gozi quits. Although he became a puppet soldier, it was because the boss, Su Ming, was too ruthless, not because he was a coward. As a black-breasted wasp, Gozi was definitely synonymous with ferocity. As soon as he stuck out his butt and exposed his tail sting, he would be ruthless. Hit back at Dehe. Before he could sting Dehe's claws, Su Ming used his mental power to give him a severe shock. Gozi could only fly behind Su Ming and circle around, buzzing and calling to express his love for Dehe. Dissatisfied. "Can you stop shouting?" Su Ming felt a little aversion to the cold. It was enough for this guy to fly around him, and it was buzzing. There was always a very disgusting feeling, as if flies were surrounding that thing. The snapping turtle didn't show too much surprise at Gozi's arrival. He raised his head and didn't even bother to look at Gozi, looking completely arrogant. In the snapping turtle's arrogant heart, it is the most ruthless person here besides Boss Su. In fact, nature has wonderful creation rules. Although the snapping turtle is the most powerful in terms of size, strength, and lethality, it is not the opponent of cats or Gozi. Okay, let's get to know each other. We will be a family from now on, don't get hurt by accident. Su Ming acted like a patriarch and let the animals get acquainted with each other. But as soon as I said these words, something felt wrong. In front of me, there is a snapping turtle with its neck raised and eyes looking at the sky, a few cats jumping around, and a black-backed wasp that can kill people. They don't look like a family. They are clearly just a bunch of beasts. Yeah, I've really become a big beast, Su Ming slapped his forehead. Early the next morning, after Su Ming finished feeding the animals, he went to Xiong Mountain. As soon as Su Ming walked to the edge of Bear Mountain, he saw a black bear family walking in the Bear Mountain with their legs twisted. Father bear and mother bear walked in front, and the little black bear followed behind. As they walked, they used their noses to nuzzle half of a watermelon. Eating juices splashing everywhere. As expected, they are a bunch of heartless foodies. Yesterday, they were chased everywhere by bees and almost killed the keeper. Today, they act as if nothing happened, living a leisurely life. Underneath the honest appearance of a foodie, there is usually a smart heart. After communicating with their mental power yesterday, the black bear family had already gotten to know Su Ming. Black bears have a keen sense of smell. As soon as Su Ming approached Xiong Mountain, the black bear family smelled Su Ming's scent. They immediately raised their heads and stood up towards Su Ming outside Xiong Mountain. He kept waving his big bear paw towards Su Ming, and the white V on his chest was particularly eye-catching. The little black bear held half of the watermelon in his arms and raised it to Su Ming, as if asking him if he wanted to eat it together. However, before Su Ming could make any move, the little black bear felt reluctant to give up. He quickly retracted his paws and took a big bite of the watermelon. He bit off 70% to 80% of half of the watermelon before eating the remaining bit again. He held it in his paws again and raised it to Su Ming. "Look at how stingy you are. No one is grabbing the watermelon for you to eat." Su Ming rolled his eyes angrily. "Brother Su, you're here. Look, there's something good." Xiao Li came from behind, holding a wooden bucket in his hand and shaking it at Su Ming. "I saw in the bucket were the honeycombs that fell yesterday. Those honeycombs were originally the size of basketballs. Later they fell from the tree and were gnawed and smashed by black bears. They were broken into pieces one by one. It was just full of honeycombs." Bucket. Xiao Li's eyes were still swollen, and he squinted and said, "Thanks to your help yesterday, this is for you. I heard from the masters that honeycombs can be sold for money, and it would be a waste to throw them away." Honeycombs can indeed be sold for money, not only the honeycombs, but also the honey, bees, and royal jelly inside. But it's not worth much. Such a big honeycomb, plus royal jelly and so on, can only be worth 1,800 yuan at most, not to mention that these honeycombs have been broken, and the royal jelly and honey inside have been licked by black bears. That's not bad, at least it can be sold for a few hundred yuan, which is equivalent to a month's bonus. Xiao Li listened to Su Ming's explanation, and instead of being disappointed, he was happy. He also came from the countryside, his family was not rich, and he only had a fixed salary a month. A few hundred yuan was a considerable windfall in his eyes. However, Su Ming did not want to sell it for money. Firstly, a few hundred yuan was not much money to him now, and he would have to waste time looking for a buyer, which was not worth it. Secondly, seeing these honeycombs reminded Su Ming that honeycomb fragments had other uses, which were much more important than a few hundred yuan. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 37. Thank you. I'll buy yours for 500 yuan. Su Ming took the bucket of broken honeycombs, and then took out 500 yuan and stuffed it into Xiao Li's pocket. "I can't take it." "How can I take this money?" Xiao Li was stunned at first, and then he quickly declined, saying that he would not take it no matter what. Although this guy is a little clumsy at work and his brain doesn't seem to be very bright, he is very simple. Su Ming helped him and saved him. These broken honeycombs were originally to thank Su Ming. How could he accept money? Su Ming didn't give him any reason to say anything, and stuffed the money into his pocket, and then ran away with the bucket. Good man. Xiao Li was moved to tears again while holding the money. Su Ming brought a large pile of broken honeycombs back to the waterside pavilion, took out a few pieces of broken honeycombs and sniffed them under his nose. A faint fragrance came from the honeycombs. Breaking off a small piece, there was still a lot of honey and royal jelly left in the honeycombs. He broke open half a bucket of honeycombs one by one, then found a knife and scraped off the remaining royal jelly on the broken honeycombs, like spreading butter, and rubbed it all onto a single, slightly larger honeycomb. "Erguze, go and call a few wasps over, the big ones." Su Ming snapped his fingers and said to Erguze, who was resting on the beam. Erguze was quite good at enjoying himself. Less than a day after arriving, he had built a small nest on a beam on the roof of the first floor of the waterside pavilion, where he could rest, hide inside, and catch some small insects such as mosquitoes, flies, and spiders to eat. It flew out of the waterside pavilion and headed towards the back mountain. Not long after, it brought back more than a dozen rather robust black-chested wasps. "Bring this to the bees, and don't eat it on the way." Su Ming handed the broken honeycomb covered with royal jelly to the wasps, and the wasps swarmed up, grabbed the honeycomb, and flew back to the back mountain. The bee colony suffered heavy losses this time, and even the queen bee died. It will take some time to recover. According to the rules of the bee colony, they will definitely produce a new queen bee, and the queen bee needs to eat royal jelly to grow. The royal jelly just scraped off is what Su Ming prepared for the new queen bee. With these ready-made royal jelly, the growth rate of the queen bee and the recovery rate of the bee colony will be greatly accelerated. There was about a quarter of the broken honeycomb left in the bucket. Su Ming smashed them all, then poured the broken slag into a plastic bucket filled with pure water, and went to the store to buy 2 bottles of vinegar. "Are you eating dumplings tonight?" asked the big sister in the store. "No, I'll buy some vinegar and see who's eating dumplings, so I'll borrow some." Su Ming shook the vinegar bottle and answered with a smile. "Big sister." After returning, pour all the vinegar into the plastic bucket, screw on the lid, and put it in a ventilated and cool place on the second floor to ferment. The last time Nangongyan came to interview him, she told him about a small trouble. At that time, he had no way to solve it. Now these beehives just come in handy. The little episode of bees finally came to an end, and Su Ming turned his mind back to the cruise ship contracted for the artificial lake. "I came back yesterday and was ready to talk to Director Song about this matter, but an accident with bees delayed it." "Xiao Su, you came just in time." Director Song saw Su Ming, and before Su Ming could speak, he took out a bright red book from his desk. There were also a few hundred yuan in the book. "What is this?" Su Ming opened the red book and saw that it was a certificate of honor, which read Yangchuan City Zoo's advanced worker in the first half of the year, Comrade Su Ming. Su Ming was stunned. "How did I become an advanced worker?" Then I understood. No wonder Section Chief Dong said something about praise yesterday. It turned out that he was foreshadowing this matter. You know, the honor of advanced workers is nothing in private enterprises. It is not as real as giving more bonuses. But in public institutions, the weight is completely different. Behind the honor, it means that the leader may want to promote you, which means that this is the capital for promotion. At least it also shows the qualifications of the honor winner. In state-owned units, qualifications are very important. So Su Ming was surprised. How could a temporary worker like him be awarded the advanced worker in the first half of the year? This is basically the highest honor that ordinary employees of the zoo can get. Director Song probably saw Su Ming's confusion and explained with a smile, "Although you have not been here for a long time, your work achievements are obvious to all. In just 1 month, you not only did your job well, but also made the cruise business colorful. Moreover, you handled 2 emergency incidents in a row. The first time you saved tourists, and the second time you sacrificed yourself to prevent your colleagues from getting hurt. Therefore, the zoo leadership collectively decided to award you this honor." Zoo leadership? Su Ming thought, the old staff of the entire zoo have been following Director Song for decades. The zoo's affairs are still decided by you, so where does the leadership come from? There is quite a lot of money in the certificate of honor, a small stack of a full 1,000 yuan. For a zoo with tight funding, a 1,000 yuan reward is a huge sum of money. "Xiao Su, have you ever thought about taking on more responsibilities?" the old director asked leisurely. "Ah, more responsibilities?" Su Ming opened his eyes wide. "Honor is always accompanied by responsibility." The old director looked well-intentioned and guided Su Ming, saying, "Look, your cruise business is good, and the zoo only charges a basic management fee. Your income this month is not small. What do you mean? Su Ming asked tentatively. From the tone of the old director, it seemed that he had the same idea as himself. However, since it was the director who brought it up first, he was not in a hurry to speak. I think the number of cruise ships in Tingfeng Shuixi is too small to meet the needs of tourists. The water surface area of Shuihun Lake is large. You can invest in buying more ships to expand your business. If you are willing to contract it, the zoo can also contract Shuihun Lake to you, the old director said. Shuihun Lake is the largest artificial lake in the zoo. It is the one that Su Ming has set his eyes on, and it is also the paradise that the alligator turtle dreamed of. Legend has it that before Cao attacked Chibi, he once trained the navy in Yangchuan, and the Shuihun Lake got its name from this. But it's just a legend. Yangchuan City is still a distance away from Chibi. As long as Cao's head had not been caught by the door, it would be impossible for him to train troops here. But it's hard to say. Things that happened thousands of years ago are hard to predict. Besides, Cao is usually very smart. He occasionally does things that are beyond his imagination. It's not surprising. How is it? There is also a Tingfeng pavilion around Shuihun Lake. It is a famous tourist attraction that the government spent millions to build. If it is well managed, it will have great potential. Director Song's tone was indifferent, but no matter how Su Ming looked at it, he felt that Director Song was seducing him to contract that place. Su Ming was a little amused. This old director usually looked very old-fashioned, but when it came to the future development of the zoo, he immediately became a different person, shrewd and ruthless. Director, I've thought about it. I am willing to contract Shuihun Lake. Su Ming nodded, but I have a condition. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 38. Director Song's eyes lit up. What are the conditions? Are they related to management fees? Originally, what Su Ming wanted to talk about was not the management fee, but since the director mentioned it, Su Ming of course jumped on it and said, of course I hope the management fee is as low as possible. Director Song laughed and said, you can rest assured. As long as it can be managed well, the park will not charge you more management fees. It is definitely not acceptable according to the 10% of the water pavilion. After all, Shuihun Lake is a major attraction, and the zoo I have to explain the past to the superiors, but within my authority, I can put it at the lowest level for you. There is no doubt about the authority of Director Song in the zoo. What he said was equivalent to expressing his position to Su Ming that he would not make any money from Su Ming in terms of management fees. Just like when we were at Waterside Pavilion before, when the cruise ship business is good, it will boost the zoo's ticket revenue, which is the main profit growth point of the zoo. Seeing Su Ming nod, Director Song followed up and said, but there is one thing I want to explain to you. You say. Director Song said, I hope that if you need to hire help in the future, you will try to consider the comrades in the zoo first. After all, the good news does not go to outsiders, which can be regarded as a little benefit to them from the zoo. Zoo employees have low incomes and little work. Most people go to work every day and are idle for most of the day. If they can earn some legal and reasonable extra money, it is a disguised benefit for the zoo's employees. Su Ming nodded. Of course, I'm not worried about inviting outsiders. But what I just wanted to say is not about management fees. Director Song glared, then you've been talking to me for a long time. Su Ming smiled. Didn't you, the old man, bring up this topic? Then he said seriously, I hope to contract the entire Shuihun Lake, not just the cruise ship business on the lake. In other words, I want everything in Shuihun Lake, including water, fish, and even the mud and stones at the bottom of the water management rights, and ownership within the contract period. Also, although I am not contracting the surrounding ancillary buildings, such as the Tingfeng Pavilion you just mentioned, I will have priority in the future under the same conditions. After hearing what Su Ming said, Director Song was stunned and asked strangely, "Why do you want these?" Before Su Ming could say anything, Director Song looked suddenly confused and said, "You don't want to raise fish, do you? Xiao Su, you are new here and don't know the situation. Shuahun Lake is an artificial lake. Although it is very large, but the water quality is very poor and not suitable for farming." Director Song thought that Su Ming had read too many movies and novels and wanted to go to Shuahun Lake to hunt for treasures at the bottom of the lake. He then said, "Although our place is a scenic spot, everyone knows that the so-called historic site is basically a tourist attraction. It's just a gimmick. We are far away from the Chibi ancient battlefield. Even if we dig up a historical site, it belongs to the country." Su Ming didn't think so much. This lake is only 20 years old. There can't be anything valuable in the lake. Don't even think about salvage. He just managed to find a few mobile phones that tourists accidentally dropped into the river. He just felt that since he was the contractor, he had to have complete control of the lake. He didn't want to do half the business and be interfered with by others for some weird reasons. As for the ecological problems in Shuahun Lake, Su Ming doesn't have to worry about it. With the ability of animal friends, doesn't such a large area of water have a place to use itself? In addition, there was another main reason that Su Ming didn't mention. The location of Shuahun Lake is very good. It is right next to the back mountain. There is no wall between it and the back mountain. The end of the lake leads directly to the back mountain. The back mountain is a branch of the Kinlan Mountains. There are countless animals in the mountain, which can be said to be a natural treasure. From a geographical point of view, occupying Shuahun Lake is equivalent to guarding the passage to the back mountain. If you go to the back mountain to do something yourself, walking from Shuahun Lake is also very hidden and difficult to be discovered. If I can't take over the entire Shuahun Lake, then I won't take over the contract. Su Ming simply sold off the small items and acted like a rogue. Director Song laughed, pointed at Su Ming, and said, "I didn't realize that you are not a big person, but you have a big heart. If you really want to take over the entire Shuahun Lake, it's not impossible. But there are two big ones. In principle, if you can do it, I will sign an agreement with you on behalf of the zoo." "Say it," Su Ming said. "First, the public welfare nature of Shuahun Lake cannot be changed. Tourists must be allowed to play on the lake and safety must be ensured. If an accident occurs, you must bear the responsibility. If you can do this, I won't bother to care about you. Whatever you want to do in Shuahun Lake, you can raise sharks if you can." "Okay," Su Ming nodded. Secondly, Director Song shook his head, looked at Su Ming with a somewhat helpless look, and said slowly, "It's a matter of cost. If you only contract the cruise ship business of Shuahun Lake, are you willing to invest more? For several cruise ships, the management fee, as I said just now, I have the authority to do so, can only be 30% of your total income at most, and it can still be negotiated. But now you propose to contract the entire Shuahun Lake and the profits from the lake, that is another matter. What you have to pay is not a management fee, but a contracting fee. The two concepts are completely different. Although it is clear to everyone at the top and bottom that there is no way to raise fish in the lake and there is no profit, but this is a large national asset after all, and we must have an explanation to the higher-ups. To put it bluntly, whether you are earning or accompanying, you have to pay a large amount of contracting fees, and you have to pay them first." "How much is it specifically?" Su Ming asked. 300,000 a year, including the Tingfeng Pavilion, will be contracted to you, but the minimum lease is 3 years." The old director added, "This is the minimum limit I can decide. This means that no matter whether you make money or lose money in the future, you must first pay 900,000 to the zoo." Seeing Su Ming silent, the old director thought that the money scared him. The cruise business was quite profitable some time ago, but it was not to the point where he could take out nearly $1 million at once. Moreover, the 900,000 was just the contract fee paid to the zoo. If you want to develop the Shuahun Lake, whether it is aquaculture or anything else, you still need a large amount of follow-up investment. Without millions of funds, you can't get it at all. Xiao Su, I know you are bold, but you have to eat one bite at a time. I still suggest that you only do cruises for a few years, and then slowly expand after you have accumulated a certain amount. To tell you the truth, there were businessmen who wanted to contract the Shuahun Lake before, and they came to the field to investigate, but in the end they all came to the conclusion that the place was indeed not suitable for aquaculture. As for other projects, they can't be done in a day or two. Accumulate for a few years? That's the normal routine. If he still had to slowly accumulate a few $100 a day with the help of animal friends, and didn't even dare to have a sense of adventure, Su Ming felt that he might as well just bump into his head and die. Even if he had a golden finger, at best he would just be hanged alive with a golden finger. 900,000 is 900,000, old director, I am willing to take the contract, you make the contract, we will sign the contract with one hand and pay the money with the other. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 39. The old principal was trying to persuade Su Ming earnestly. After all, 900,000 yuan was too much at once. Don't talk about him as a young man who had just graduated and whose family conditions were not very good. Even if he was from a middle-class family, 900,000 yuan was too much. Not a small amount of money either. Hearing Su Ming's immediate agreement, Director Song was stunned. He stared at Su Ming for a long time before asking with some uncertainty, "Do you have 900,000? Look what you said, why should I tell you this if I don't have money?" Su Ming said with a smile. Director Song walked back and forth in the office twice before frowning and saying, "That's not right. Although your waterside cruise business is good, after all, it has only been less than a month, and you can only earn 70,000 to 80,000 yuan at most. Where did you come from? You got so much money at once, Xiao Su, you didn't borrow it, it's not wise to borrow money to do business." "Hey, old director, I said I was lucky and a large amount of money fell from the sky. Do you believe it? You won't say that you won the lottery, right? It's almost like buying a lottery ticket." Su Ming chuckled and didn't deliberately hide anything. He directly talked about the auction of monkey wine. Just like what he said to Zhao Yun, Su Ming also concealed something at this time. He did not say that it was brewed by the old monkey king in the zoo. Instead, he said that he went hiking in the back mountain in his spare time, and accidentally walked into a small valley. After discovering Hoa wine, and with the help of Zhao Yun, he sold the Hoa wine at the Xiangjiang auction house to a stupid and wealthy capitalist. Although this rhetoric may sound exaggerated or even legendary, upon closer inspection, there is nothing wrong with it. What's more, there is Zhao Yun helping out. Director Song has been a leader for decades, so he still knows Zhao Yun's background. With the help of a great expert like Zhao Yun, it is not difficult to make millions. Even if there is no such thing as monkey wine, with Zhao Yun's background and connections, it is easy to support a young man. Who makes Su Ming be his daughter's savior? Su Ming was never prepared to hide the fact that he made money from auctions. With more than 3 million, and if he still pretends to be poor all day long and lives a miserable life, what difference does it make if he has no money? It's better to have no money. At least when you have no money, you can live a hard life with peace of mind. But if you have money and don't dare to use it, and you carefully hide it all day long, it would be too depressing. So, let's admit it openly, I am just lucky, what's wrong with you? Su Ming's frankness made Principal Song give up his doubts. Not many people are lucky, but not none. There are reports in newspapers and on TV all the time, about so and so picking up some treasure and making a fortune all of a sudden. A few days ago, I heard that a farmer picked up a meteorite and a luminous pearl, which was worth more than 60 million. In comparison, come on, Su Ming's 3 million is considered a small amount. After listening to Su Ming's words, director Song was stunned for a moment, and then marveled at Su Ming's strong luck, which was comparable to buying a lottery ticket. Hee, people buy lottery tickets for 5 million or several hundred million, but I only sold it for over 3 million. It's still early, Su Ming said with a smile. You kid, don't act like you've got something cheap, but you're still good. Now that you have money, as a member of the zoo, don't you think it's too much to donate some money to the zoo? Huh, Su Ming's little face suddenly turned a little dark. What a reward for this world. Director Song was very direct and said, my family is not easy to run. Without funds, I can't even install a camera in the zoo. Don't pretend to be in pain. I don't want more. You can donate 30 to 50 yuan if you come out and strengthen the security facilities around several first-level protected animal areas in the zoo. It will be considered a credit to you. In this way, I will submit the contract to the superiors and the approval will be much smoother. Okay, if you ask, don't use 30,000 to 50,000, just add 30,000 to 50,000, which is equal to 80,000. If you round up the whole number, I will add 20,000, and the total donation will be 100,000. Su Ming looked like a prodigal son of a nouveau riche. Look. The feeling of spending a lot of money is quite sour. The poor hate the rich not because the rich spend money indiscriminately, but because they have no money and envy others who can spend a lot of money. Someone has said that spending money lavishly and making money are the greatest enjoyments in life. Everything went smoothly afterwards. Director Song contacted the supervisory authority at noon that day and obtained approval from the supervisory authority. Surprisingly, Director Song also obtained additional benefits for Su Ming. Since Shuahun Lake is empty and not rented to outsiders, if Su Ming pays the 3-year contract fee at once, he can pay the contract fee in the first year as follows: 200,000, in the second year it will be 250,000, and in the third year it will actually be 300,000. Su Ming had not planned to pay in installments. After calculating this, apart from the 100,000 donated to the zoo, Su Ming still saved 50,000. Everyone was happy. The government reduced the zoo's expense burden. The zoo had money to strengthen security and received a one-time income of 750,000. Su Ming got the right to use and manage the big lake for 3 years. If Su Ming had to pay for the excavating of a lake with an area of 100 acres, it would cost a lot of money just to rent an excavator. Besides, Shuahun Lake has all the facilities. If he took it directly, it would save Su Ming a lot energy and economy. You boy, work hard and you will achieve results in the future. I will think of ways to apply for you to be an outstanding entrepreneur in Yangchuan City. The old principal patted Su Ming heavily on the shoulder. Su Ming grinned, don't, you always use an advanced zoo worker and it costs me 700,000 to 800,000. I don't dare to be a model at the municipal level anymore. My little money is not enough. If you really reach the level of an outstanding entrepreneur at the municipal level, you won't take hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars seriously, Director Song said. What he said makes sense. Who can be a city-level model soldier without hundreds of millions of assets under his name? There is no need to wait for hundreds of millions of assets. The news that Su Ming became a 3-millionaire caused a small sensation after it spread in the zoo. When Sister Tong heard that Su Ming picked up some monkey wine and bought it for millions, her eyes almost popped out. When she took Su Ming to sign the contract, she kept asking Su Ming if he had a girlfriend and what kind of girls he liked. She looked like she wanted to be a matchmaker, which made Su Ming embarrassed. Sister, I'm still young. The country advocates late marriage and late childbearing. It's too early for me to consider marriage now. Su Ming scratched his head and laughed. Sister Tong was very enthusiastic. She glared at him and said, "Who said it's too early? Didn't you see that the country has opened up the second child policy? It's because you young people just want to play for a few more years and refuse to get married and have children, which makes the entire country lack human resources." Su Ming was speechless. It seems that the country's economy is not good, so blame me? Is it because I don't have affairs with women that I'm holding the country back? Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 40. Sister Tong was a big talker, and Su Ming always felt that she might have a diffuse aura. If she knew something, all the employees in the zoo would know about it in less than half a day. After signing the contract, all the colleagues Su Ming met along the way came up to congratulate him and ask Su Ming to treat him. Su Ming was not a stingy person, so he agreed one by one and planned to wait for some weekend to invite all the zoo employees to go out and have a good time in the sea. Good people are rewarded, Xiao Li, the breeder at Xiangshan, muttered while feeding the bears. If you have money, don't spend it frivolously. Save it in the bank and earn interest. Save it to start a family and start a business in the future. Don't spend this money in the future. Master Peng carefully put away the 2 bottles of wool Yanjai sent by Su Ming, and then said to Su Ming with joy and a little blame, "Apprentices should respect their master. These 2 bottles of wine don't cost much." Su Ming looked indifferent. Master Peng is a nice person. Many old masters have the habit of taking advantage of others, hiding their secrets, and even deliberately making things difficult for their apprentices when they meet those with weird personalities. However, Master Peng has always taken good care of himself and often treats himself to drinks. Wine, the relationship between master and disciple is quite good. Moreover, Chinese people pay great attention to the inheritance of masters and apprentices, and respect teachers. Now that I have some money, if I don't respect Master Peng, on the one hand, I will not be able to justify it, and on the other hand, it will be easy for others to gossip behind my back. Inadequate success and more failure than failure is a typical characteristic of villains. Su Ming did not want to start his own business in the front and have villains behind him to undermine him. Everyone knew that Su Ming made money, but Su Ming didn't dare to tell his family. He and his mother don't live together, hundreds of miles apart, and suddenly he tells her that he is rich. Although he can explain it clearly, his mother is getting older, so it is inevitable that she will worry blindly. Su Ming thought about it and simply went to an insurance company to spend 500,000 to apply for a financial management style commercial insurance, with his mother as the beneficiary. From now on, my mother will receive more than 1,000 yuan every month until her death. In their small mountain home, they can live well with more than 1,000 yuan, not to mention that my mother has other income. No matter what happens in the future, at least my mother will not have financial problems in the rest of her life. On the phone, Su Ming only said that more than 1,000 yuan would be sent back every month in the future. He did not tell his mother that if something happened to him, the insurance company would hand over all 500,000 yuan to the beneficiary at once. It's mom. In this way, excluding the contract and insurance money, Su Ming probably still had close to 2 million left. Money, house, car, wife, son. Now that we have money, the Feng Shui pavilion is more comfortable than a big villa. My wife and son are not in a hurry for the time being, so the only thing left is the car. It's time to buy a car. Su Ming didn't know much about cars, so he simply called Wang Hao. This guy was an expert in this field. At least among his classmates at the university, Wang Hao knew the most about cars. Wang Hao was actually the first one besides Zhao Yun to know that Su Ming had made a small fortune. Wang Hao's family could barely afford more than 3 million yuan, but the money was under the control of Wang Hao's parents, and Wang Hao himself couldn't even afford 3 million yuan. You kid is so lucky. Wang Hao said half-jokingly while driving the little winged tiger, if you go to the mountains for a trip, you can actually pick up millions. There is also the cruise ship business, they are all the same cruise ships, and other people's businesses are very limited. You are better off making a small amount of money, watching a small TV, drinking a small amount of wine, not even watching the scene all day long, the money just flowed into my pocket. Next time, take me to your ancestral grave to see if there is any smoke. You can't say that. Training cats and snapping turtles is also very hard, Su Ming said. Wang Hao rolled his eyes. Hard work? Brother, why do I think you are just playing? Lao Su, you must have accumulated some great virtues in your previous life. If God helps me, I will hang out with you in the future. If there is any good thing, don't forget to bring it with you, me alone. Wang Hao was actually in a good mood. He followed Su Ming into the cruise ship business. He initially invested 8,000 yuan, but later did almost nothing. After almost a month, he made a net profit of just over 40,000 yuan. At this rate of making money, coupled with his old man's subsidy, his dream of changing his car is not far away. When it comes to buying a car, what do you recommend? Su Ming asked. It depends on what price you are going to buy and what type of product you are going to buy. Wang Hao patted the escape steering wheel and said, generally speaking, cars, SUVs, off-road vehicles, and business MPVs are the kind that can seat a lot of people, so you will definitely not consider them. Cars have small space and low footprints. But at the same price, the configuration and comfort are better than off-road. Ignore the car, it must be an off-road vehicle. In terms of money, it can be between 200,000 and 600,000. Su Ming thought that because of Friends of Animals, he would definitely have to drive to the wild in the future, so the off-road vehicle performance comes first. As for comfort, it is not important. He grew up riding a tractor. Even if an off-road vehicle worth hundreds of thousands of dollars is less comfortable, it is still compared with a car of the same level. It cannot be worse than a tractor. Then there are many things to consider. For more than 200,000 yuan, there are a lot of Escape, Tiguan, and Subaru. There are also many good cars for 30,000 to 40,000 yuan, such as the Highlander, Pajero, etc. for 560,000 yuan, it must be practical. You can buy a Toyota Overlord, the kind of car that the wealthy people in the Middle East drive, which can be used as an armed combat vehicle with a machine gun on it. If you want to save face, you can also buy a BMW and Mercedes-Benz. It seems that the cheapest Land Rover now is only 500,000 to 600,000 yuan. But since you require real off-road performance, I have two suggestions. First, don't buy a domestic car, at least a joint venture. It's not that I don't love my country. Although domestic cars have developed rapidly in the past 2 years, they are still far behind the world's first-class level in technology, especially in core technologies such as engines. Second, don't buy a city SUV. Isn't this a city SUV? Su Ming asked in confusion. Wang Hao nodded and said, this car is mainly driven by my grandfather, and it is basically in the city. A city SUV like this only has an off-road vehicle shape and its off-road performance is slightly better than that of a sedan. It is impossible to go off-road in harsh environments. It is mainly because of its large space. There is a joke called it a grocery shopping car. After listening to Wang Hao's introduction, Su Ming probably had an idea. However, he still had to go to the scene to see the car. The performance of the car is one aspect, and the appearance is also very important. No one wants to spend money to buy a car that they hate. Famous Car Plaza, the largest new car trading market in Yangchuan City, is home to many Ford stores of major brands. Wang Hao found a parking space and parked the car. The two got out of the car. Wang Hao pointed to the two storefronts with silver bullhead logos in front of him. Let's take a look at Toyota first. I have to admit that the Japanese cars are absolutely world class. One is GAC Toyota, and the other is FA Toyota.